Okay, we are recording. Matt, how are you today?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Where are you, mate?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Nice. Sun shining?
Yeah, it is actually. I mean, it's been off and on these days. It's like we've had like days and days of rain. It's quite nice actually.
Yeah. Matt, I'm going to kick the show off the same way as I always do, and it's to ask you to tell me the song that you regard as having the greatest ever intro, please.
This was very hard. Um, I think my choice was Under the Pressure by the War on Drugs,
Yeah.
and I think it's that tape delay on the hi-hat. There's something about the way that starts that song. And I obviously have such an emotional connection to seeing that band so many times because we've supported them over the years and they're our friends. And there's something like when that happens live and you know it's coming and the crowd just gets ready for it. There's nothing better. I mean, I've seen it so many times that
Yeah.
I just get that feeling. And it's just so beautiful and so simple.
Yeah.
And it's funny, it's actually been ripped off so many times now. I hear it all the time in indie
Yeah.
rock records. I'm like, oh, okay, we've already heard that one.
Yeah. It's a beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful album, but it's a wonderful track. Um, I want to ask you about your approach to intros and songwriting, I guess. Um, and I mean, I always sort of like to mention when I'm talking to musicians about the kind of the way that sort of people are getting their music now. So many people are sort of getting it via playlists on Spotify, and I watch my kids now consuming music and kind of being reintroduced to music from my youth via TikTok and things like that, which is crazy. But I guess it's just how industries
I've
evolve and
crumbled.
marketing techniques, and yeah, and it's not necessarily my bag, but so anyway, what I want to know is, I mean, I mean, that War on Drugs intro is very long and beautiful, and I think with new artists and that now to kind of get out there, I think there is pressure on them to sort of, you see it with commercial sort of pop acts, start with a chorus and get picked up because you're on this abyss that is Spotify. And where I'm going with this kind of roundabout sort of question, Matt, is to ask you, all of these things that seem to be trends in how people are consuming music and things like that, does any of it filter through into your creative process?
um, really my best not to let that happen. I think that I think there's some things that are inevitable because you're right. I mean, the pressure of the way people consume music these days is so different than the way I listen to music or even I consume music. So I think about it in that way and try to just block it out and go, it doesn't matter. Like this is um it's okay to let it breathe. I mean, it's a tough choice because I love intros, right?
Oh,
So and there's a lot of intros on our records, a lot of intros and outros. And so um and our first single Loveless was like I remember having conversation after conversation. "Oh, it takes too long to get to the verse or and I just remember being like, who cares?
yeah,
You know, it's about setting it up. And actually the intro is really important to an actual listener if you're going to actually listen to the record. But you're so right. It's like, man, it's crazy how quick people are getting into songs and how fast they how quickly they come and go. And it's like I mean, but also I do think there is an art to grabbing people. So it doesn't have to be about how long it is. Like I do remember when we wrote our song Water, I was really interested in having a song that just comes out of the gates kind of rocking. But the intro is also to me, it's like that's the intro. Like it's not like I just start singing right away. It's like we're
yeah,
setting it up. And there's sometimes when you want to come in strong, and there's sometimes when you want to kind of float in. I mean, God, I'd be remiss to not like The Cure, like is such a great example. Like, I know we're only supposed to talk about one song, but
no,
Robert
let's.
Smith.
You've got all the time in the world to talk about the queue and me, brother.
Okay, cool. But like Robert Smith, right? It's like intros, like Plain Song. I mean, that opens a record and like it just you can't turn that off. I
Mm.
mean, but you're right. I mean, I don't know if that was on a freaking Spotify playlist today. I mean, I don't know if the kids would listen to it. They
Mm.
did actually. They probably wouldn't. You know, it's like, but um, to answer your question, I love intros. So
Yeah.
and you know, I mean, like the other choice I was thinking about for me, which was the second choice I had for this was the Rainbow, but Spirit of Eden. The way that opens a record, it's like if you don't lean in when you hear that, then I don't know
Mm.
if you have soul. And it's the same thing with Plain Song. It's the same thing with Under the Pressure. It's like you lean in. To me, that's the point.
Yeah.
I do understand there's a pressure for all artists to like get to the verse or get to the thing and get out of there and nobody's
Mm.
listening. It's like, but if we let that kind of dictate the way the art goes, then we're really, really fucked.
But that's why we value and treasure and require people like Kurt, Robert Smith,
Yep.
Hollis. Do you know what I
Yep.
mean? Like,
Exactly.
okay.
Exactly. And that's why I go back there all the time, you
Yeah.
know, and it's just a well of like beauty and it's also like there's a nurturing quality about it. It's like when you're listening to music and you feel like it's hugging you and nurturing you and inviting you in. Now it's like there's no invitation. It's like how
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
and yeah, that is on purpose because of
Yeah.
the way that people consume music. It's
Yeah.
100%.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask you to tell me, please, the first song you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you, please, Matt.
The Rising, I think, was that record, but that song, and there was another song on that record called My City of Ruins that really kind of grabbed me because of the time that happened. Um, Obviously, there was around 2001 when I heard, it was 2001 when I heard My City of Ruins and The Rising. And um, I was kind of always aware of Bruce Springsteen because I'm from the East Coast and I'm from New York. And there's a Bruce Springsteen, Billy Joel thing. And like, of course, I'd heard Born to Run and I'd heard all the records. And my dad kind of, I wouldn't say he was like the biggest Bruce Springsteen fan, but like he had Bruce Springsteen was just on. If like you couldn't kind of, you couldn't live in that part of the world and not be exposed to Bruce Springsteen. Like it just
Yeah.
doesn't happen. So, yeah, there was such an amazing way he responded to 9/11, which was the moment that I kind of discovered my voice as an artist, and that's where I kind of I was living at the school in Connecticut, and that record came out, and I saw him play My City of Ruins and The Rising on a tribute, like a 9/11 tribute concert, and I was just like, I don't know, completely transfixed with a guy and his guitar and some background singers, and it kind of inspired me to. I'd always been kind of writing poems and kind of trying to sing in the Glee Club, and I played drums and I was in bands, but like I never really wanted to write my own songs. And that record kind of made me want to write my own songs. There was something about it that just hit me really deep in the heart that would just go like, I need to express myself. I want to express myself like that. And I tried, and then I kind of never stopped.
Yeah.
That was a kind of pivotal moment and pivotal record for me.
Matt, you said you was transfixed. And like, if you had to pinpoint what the emotion was, what would you say it was?
I think that the idea that one person, a singular person, can take something so big that happened and affected so many people and just make it so simple and beautiful and reflective that all of a sudden everything kind of makes more sense. And I think
Yeah.
as songwriters, that's what we're after is taking these grand ideas. Or for me, I mean, that's kind of what I'm always after, taking these grand ideas and trying to put them into these little fragments that happen over what 3 minutes or 6 minutes. But you have to say a lot and you have to try to emotionally connect in that time. And it's not a lot of time to do it. And so the great ones can really do that. And Bruce, I mean, he's done it time and time again. And it's odd because that is the record that kind of brought me into Bruce's world. It's not my favorite record. The Rising's
Mm.
not my favorite record by Bruce Springsteen by any means. But as you get older, then you discover the catalog and you discover Nebraska and you discover
Yeah, of
all these
course.
darkness. And So, but like, I remember that moment being like, oh, wow, this guy's going to be an important part of my life. And I think that that songwriting quality is just like, it's incredible to be able to take a moment so big that, I mean, yeah, like everyone was affected by that,
Yeah,
much like the pandemic, which was a lot about this record, but like,
yeah.
yeah, so that's a beautiful, just really beautiful to me.
And I want to take you back at, while we're sort of in, talking about sort of like formative years. Um, Paint us a little picture, Matt, of what home was like and how important music was in the home, if at all.
Yeah, I mean, music. My dad was very into music. It really started, to be honest. I played hockey growing up, and before school, when I was living at home, which was up until sixth grade, I got recruited to go play hockey away from home very young, like almost too young. I was just, but I committed so much of my life to this sport. And in the morning, before hockey, before school, I had these private lessons with a group of kids that were kind of, I don't know, we were like elite kids that were on Long Island that were training, and we trained every day before school. And my dad would drop me off before he went to work, and every time we'd get in the car, he'd play me something. I mean, it was really wild. It was like I remember hearing Peter Gabriel so for the first time, and it was just in the car with my dad, and be like,
Yeah,
listen to this, and I'll never forget. I don't remember how he was or like what. I don't even know where he found it, but like he played me Parachutes really early on by Coldplay, like, and he was like, I really like this record. And I was like, okay, I mean, I was a kid.
yeah,
That was kind of the relationship to music. He's he was obsessed with Paul Simon. He loved Bob Dylan. He loved Neil Young, and he just played me records in the car. Like we would just drive to hockey practice, and he would say, "I think you'd like this, and you should listen to this." And he's still like that, to be honest. I
yeah.
mean, I think his discovery is kind of he hasn't gotten so much discovery now. He kind of success recently showing him stuff that he likes, but I still pride myself on trying.
Yeah. Well, let's stay in the formative years, Matt, for the next track, and that's the song that reminds you of your time at school, please.
Yeah, Territorial Pissings by Nirvana.
Yeah,
Uh, and I that yeah, just that the grunge movement when it happened. And I was talking to my friend about this the other day, but because I grew up in athletics and in locker rooms, like there was a lot of testosterone going on with like young boys. And I think about it, it's kind of really odd. And when Nirvana was just the thing that everyone listened to, and like I just remember so many times listening to that song in particular and getting pumped to go play a game or and then you got into like the world that was Kurt, and everybody wanted to be Kurt, and he was the coolest dude in the world, and kind of 90s kid. So that, and I remember that was also the first. My sister's 9 years older than me, and she was into like Madonna and um, Paul Abdul and like Michael Jackson, and then I remember like Nirvana happened, and it was like the first moment. I mean, it was the first moment we were able to be like, I mean, he's cool, right? So like there's something so beautiful about that. I remember that very vividly. My sister being like, Kurt Cobain's really cool, And I
yeah,
was like, yeah, you're right. And so it was, but a lot of it had to do with again, like just that athletics, that kind of like you're in the locker room with the guys and like everyone was listening to this kind
yeah.
of angsty music.
The Territorial Pistons is the most frenzied track on Nevermind, isn't it?
And it's crazy because it actually is so. I revisited it recently, and I was like, man, the other songs are so beautiful, and Territorial Pissing, he's just like going for it. I
The
mean,
rest of the album's a pop record. Every
it's
song is
so
just
pop.
perfect pop.
It's so pop, and that one's just like he's going for the. It's like the
Yeah.
only really grunge record on the whole record. It's wild.
Mm. Did was that a sort of gateway to other guitar music then? Because obviously, around then it was Soundgarden, obviously Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains and such. Was it a kind of gateway to that world?
Big time. Pearl Jam was huge for me.
Mm.
Eddie Vedder was huge for me. There was
Yeah,
like, um, and it's it's weird because I listen to some Pearl Jam records now, like going back on it, knowing because when you're in school, you're just listening to music. You're not listening to it and kind of with a critical ear. You're just letting it wash over you. There's something
Mm,
so beautiful about that. And like now I listen to Pearl Jam record, I'm like, God, that snare sounds horrible. But like there's something still nostalgic about Eddie Vedder's voice for me.
mm.
Like
Yeah,
there's like the second he starts singing, I'm like, man, like that's the guy I grew up with,
yeah.
So yeah, totally up. I mean, all those guys.
Did you know? I mean, you obviously just mentioned there that you sound very gifted at hockey. I was going to say, did you know what you wanted to be when you was at school? Was it kind of being sort of thrust upon you that hockey was the way to go?
Yep. I mean, that's all I wanted to do. That was like I wanted to go to play Division 1 college hockey and eventually try to make the NHL. I mean, that's all I cared about. I mean, it was a and until music happened, I was always very into music. I had played drums. My dad got me a drum set really early on, and like he would really push me to like explore that, which give him a lot of credit because I was underneath the kitchen just like fucking playing drums, and my mom and dad were like fine with it. Which I think back, I'm like, I don't know if I have a kid, if I would ever let them play drums.
Yeah,
It's
that's a supportive parents, man. There's
it's
lots of
crazy.
instruments they could have got you. Drums, man. That's that. There's all the love there.
I know. I was like, fucking, that's crazy. But um, yeah. So but hockey was my obsession, and music was kind of my hobby. And then I would say sophomore year of high school, I just fucking became obsessed with music.
What was what
And
was what was doing it for you then?
I think it was these singer-songwriters. It was like and then I went through a very, very heavy phase of jam music, which was very big on the East Coast. It was like you would listen to Grateful Dead and Dave Matthews Band and all these bands that were kind of like oddballs. Um, but and I think back on it, I'm like, God, that music's really weird and kind of horrible, but again, nostalgic for me. But also informative. And um, I've had this conversation with Sam because he's from the UK, obviously, in my band, and that scene never really came into the UK stratosphere. So there's like a
No.
real blind spot for that scene, and I tried to explain it to people, and I think back about it. And one thing that's really interesting is that that scene kind of loosely connected to Pearl Jam in a way. Like there was a quality of live music that people would go just for the live shows. So when I became obsessed for like a year and a half with Dave Matthews Band, it was because of the obsession with the fact that they were changing their set list every night and band was kind of jamming. Now I listen to it, I'm like, oh man, that's kind of some of that stuff's really cringe. But I realized that the obsession was the fact that the band was a band. Like
Yeah.
every night you're going to get something different. And I, to this day, take that on. And I see bands like the War on Drugs, and it's just inspiring because, or the National, or all these, they change the set list. They're trying things and they're playing their songs differently live. And so I think that's been really steeped into my soul.
Mm.
Like the bands on their third record, I've been like, we got to keep pushing. We got to try stuff live. We got to take chances live, and
Oh,
so
Jam still do that as well.
Pearl Jam do it all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, Pearl Jam's a great example because they do it.
Mm.
It's become part of their kind of ethos, right?
Mm.
And like weirdly, Pearl Jam is connected to Dave Matthews Band. A lot of people don't understand there was like a really tight connection in that community of people that were like doing this kind of jammy, even though Dave couldn't be further from grunge, but there's like a world that started to appear. And for me, that world became very apparent that it was obsession with going to shows. And I was obsessed with going to shows.
Yeah.
I mean, obsessed with it. And that's where my love of music really turned. Like I was like, I want to play music. I want to be in a band.
Tell me about the first record you remember buying from a record store.
Um, well, the first song that I ever
Yeah.
bought, OK Computer was the first record, and I remember very, very vividly like asking my friend if he wanted to go and like get OK Computer. That
Yeah.
was like that was just I don't know that. And like you said, rock, like guitar music. I think that's when I realized that like there was something going on that was a little more arty, that was a little bit more interesting that you could do with
Mm.
guitars in a band. And the other day, we in the van on the way to South by Southwest, we found this old. I don't know. It was must have been like a BBC Six Music breakdown with Nigel about that record about OK Computer, and it went away. Sam and I found it years ago, and then it just like disappeared from the internet. And he found it again on Reddit, and we listened to it, and it's like I'll send it to you, and it's a breakdown of OK Computer. It's like 2.5 hours long, and God, the band can make that record is just still to this day just astounding to me that they could make a record. Like there's so much heart, there's so much energy, there's so many chances taken. It's just so beautiful. That record just still kills me.
It's fucking ridiculous, man. It's like I remember I was living at home with my parents, and I was I was out and about touring in bands, and I was back home and that had just come out, and I just remember my parents coming in my room and going, I had headphones on, and they were going, "Can you stop swearing?" And what it was the end of Exit Music when it just drops, and I was like, literally, I must have just been sitting there just going, "Fucking hell." And like, and they were like, seriously, are you aware of like, I'm so sorry, like, you know, but it, I'd never heard anything like it. It blew my mind, and it still does.
No, I know, and it's so fucking crazy because I want that back. I mean, and I don't know if because of the way we consume music, and because there was like a moment in time where one record was the record that everyone was talking about, and it was like a band obviously taking chances, and a band that had stepped into their own and kind of going like, no, we don't just do that, we do this. We make fucking records. Like, I don't know. I'm like, where is that now? And everything is up against time constraints and all this fucking shit that just it's really like that's all anybody who is in a band should strive for. That's what I think.
But that almost goes back to the first question of if that record come out now, would anybody know about it? Would it, would it get
I
would it get
honestly
on the radio? Probably not.
no, I honestly don't think so. I mean, maybe six,
Oh
maybe
yeah,
like
six, yeah.
six would play it, but like I don't fucking know. And I think about this all the time. It's like, and you have yes, that has to steep into art in some ways, art and commerce, or always at odds. And like, think about fucking OK Computer, and like we listen. I mean, I must have heard that record a billion times.
Yeah.
So like, seriously? And it's a band playing at the top of their game, which is it's just the playing. Like I was saying to Sam that night, we got into our hotel room, and I was like, "Yeah, it's fucking amazing that they made that record, but it's also like it's fucking amazing how good that band is. Like everybody in that band is so fucking good, and yeah, it's like the sum of its parts. It's like you can't really mess with that chemistry. And Nigel needed the band at that moment. Not it's like you have a producer that's obviously his skill set is ridiculous, but nobody knows. Like that was the first record Nigel produced that you know what I mean?
First
Like
time I'd heard of him. It was the first time I'd heard of him.
he hadn't produced anything of any note. He was just the guy who was around that the band was like, "Hey, you want to help us make these things and come to our rehearsal space?" And then he ends up making that because Nigel was also like needed the band. He needed to make that record for himself so that people could know that he was that producer. Also very obsessed with that relationship, and that being the starting point, and that's what you get. It's like fucking Jesus. It's great.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I run a venue, and we're about to celebrate our 40th anniversary. We're the longest running alternative venue in or alternative club in the UK. And
where's the venue?
It's in Essex, and I've been going through lots of bits and pieces for this documentary is being made, and I found the contract for Radiohead for when they came and played, and they were a support band, and I've still got it, and I've framed it now, and it's Radiohead agreed to play the Pink Toothbrush in Rayleigh, Essex for the sum of £50 and a case of beer. Now, when you think Might be a little bit more than that now, but
Oh my God, that's incredible. Incredible.
right. Well, it's ironic that I mentioned my club because we're going to go clubbing for the next track.
Okay.
And tell me the song that soundtracked your years in Clubland, Matt, because when I got your answers, man, I did not expect to see this one.
Okay. This is a really, really odd story.
Right.
So there is this trip that my hockey team had to take to Finland. And we were going to like basically play these teams in Finland. And I had never been to overseas ever. You know, I was like, I was in seventh, eighth grade. So I was like really young. And we got to Finland and there we all stayed with billet with like families in Finland. The whole team was different families. And the first night, the hockey team took us out to this club, like proper like fucking rave. And there's
And
that
how old would
that
you have been?
I mean, we were like 14. I mean, it
That
was like
sounds amazing.
we were not meant to be there. It was fucking wild. And I'll never forget. I mean, it's crazy. I actually found the t-shirt from like that time and had like the American flag and the Finnish flag and it like had both teams' names on it. And it was just such a beautiful experience. But like they took us to this club and then they took us to this club, same club every night for like the next like 4 nights. And that fucking song, I'm Good, over. I mean, I seriously, I mean, probably not, but in my head, that was the song that played like a million fucking times. And it's like, that's the only thing I could think of. I was like, if I'm being honest, like that's what I think of because that was the first experience I ever had going to like
Yeah.
a rave. And now, and then honestly, like I actually do have quite an obsession with electronic music and
Mm.
burial and all of the weird James Holden and all this weird kind of avant-garde electronic music that's getting made now. I think is so interesting.
Mm.
Um, that was like the first that was the first thing I thought of, and that song is absolutely horrible.
And it's interesting as well to you mentioned burial and such, and it's so many. I do honestly think that so many people that loved guitar music as well throughout the 90s and the early noughties then started experimenting and that but we've listening to the likes of Aphex Twin and things like burial on the back of Radiohead.
100%. And I think Aphex, I think that symbiotic relationship between Radiohead and Aphex Twin, I think, is what opened up the world for people to feel like it was okay if you were into guitar music to like electronic music. I mean,
Absolutely.
there's a lot of horrendous electronic music. There's a lot of horrendous guitar music.
Yeah.
So yeah, I found that very interesting too. And I maybe Tom's expression on the Eraser. I remember like the Eraser was a big moment for that as well because that record was so computer.
Yeah.
Like it just felt so singular. Like you could tell he made it on the computer, and that was I don't know something really sweet about that as well.
Yeah. And the impact as well of like kind of sort of sample culture and hip hop. The fact that I got lost in DJ Shadow because of Tom York banging on about him.
100%, 100%. I mean, it happens all the time.
Mm. Yeah.
Where artists start bringing Tom and Jen. I mean, he's really good at taking something that's like buried in the underground and going like, "Hey, this you can listen to this," and it's there's a palette here that you're gonna like. I mean, some of it I'm is so out there that
Yeah.
I'm like, but 99% of it is beautiful.
Yeah. Tell me a favorite song from an artist from your home county, please, Matt.
This song, "The Downeaster Alexa" by Billy Joel, is about basically the exact area I grew up in, Oyster Bay, New York. And it's about his boat called the Downeaster Alexa and how he takes it onto the Long Island Sound and he goes fishing with his friends and he plots the course to the inland. It's just everything I grew up with is in that one song. Anytime my friends and I get together from Long Island, it's like you are guaranteed to hear that song. My sister knows comes with the territory. And Billy Joel does just in general.
Yeah.
That's so much a part of my childhood and my youth. So yeah, that's the song. And he is literally from the exact place I grew up.
Do you feel that sort of affinity to artists that have come through, places, where you was born, artists that have sort of led the way, and do you see things like that as, because where I grew up, there wasn't huge amounts, aside from Depeche Mode, there wasn't huge amounts of artists that were kind of come from where I come from that went on to have success. Do you take inspiration when you're growing up looking at artists that come from down the road that have gone on to do, incredible things?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think so. Yeah, I think it's anytime there's like an example of somebody or something that happens that's kind of close to home, I think it's inspiring.
Yeah,
Um, and I don't know, I'm obsessed with that idea. It's just one person doing one thing that changes, like back to to the rising, back to Bruce Springsteen or any of these geniuses. It's like one person saying one thing that affects so many people.
yeah,
Um, Something very special about that. And then when it's like you can connect to where they're talking about and what they're talking, like there's a line in Only the Good Die Young, and he talks about this. Billy Joel talks about this. Pretty sure it's Only the Good Die Young, but there's a very specific place called the Americana in on Long Island, and like if you're not from Long Island, you'd have no idea what that even remotely means. So I'm
yeah,
obsessed with that idea that like I know, and people in there. I know what he's talking about. I've been
yeah,
there, or like even in the Downeaster Alexa. I mean, a lot of it is like that. Um, and so every line means something to you because you can relate to it and you know exactly what it
yeah,
looks
yeah,
like. I mean, Bruce Springsteen made his living on that.
yeah,
And to a large part, I think Billy did too.
yeah. For your last track, Matt, I'm going to ask you to tell us a song by an artist that you think the listeners to this podcast may not know of.
Now that I've done this podcast, and I can tell that you have very good taste. I'm sure people have heard of this song, the Downtown Lights by the Blue Nile, but
Yeah,
very, it's my favorite thing in the world when someone doesn't know this song and you go bang and you put that on and just shut up.
yeah,
And it yet to fail. Doesn't matter what music they're into. That song um has something that is just it's magic. It's like fucking that song just I mean, I've heard that song a billion times and it still breaks my heart. I mean, I think I listened to it this morning. Um,
yeah,
I was fucking hey, if I could write that, I mean, Jesus.
yeah,
Um, and Paul's done it a million times over now.
yeah. It's so weird. They are that sort of best kept secret that's come out of Scotland. Is so weird. They're just that band that every now and again people go, "Have you heard of the Blue Nile?" And you're like, "Yeah," and they're like, "Fucking hell, man, how good are they?" And it's like it's just never kind of crossed over to that next level. Which I don't want to be Mr. Indie Wanker, but I do like that. I do like that it's a little bit of a
You
secret,
do?
and people like feel a bit special when you meet someone else that likes it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, I had last in November we were over in Glasgow and I got to hang with Paul and meet him and
Wow, really?
yeah, it was maybe the best day of my life. And so uh, him and I are in contact on email and just a beautiful soul, but also like still just has so much art in it, and like you can just tell like that's the
Yeah,
guy that made that music, and it's just fucking beautiful. And you're right, it is like we made this last record with Chris Wall, who produced our first record. Um, the engineer on our first record, this guy Mike Davis, Chris Wall is engineer, and then we had Mike Davis co-produce this new record, this third record with us. And he had never fucking heard it. he'd never heard of the Blue Nile, and we were banging on, oh, it kind of sounds like the Blue Nile. That moment's kind of like Blue Nile-ish, or and then after we made the record, he put it on and he called me. He was like, "What? How have I never heard this music?" And I was like, "You're not alone, but also, yes, I agree. How have we never heard this music? Like, it's like, and there's something beautiful about the fact that like it feels like it's always been there for you, and that's kind of my favorite thing of when I discover something.
Yeah.
It's like this hasn't always been here for me.
Mm.
Like it feels like I've known this record for since the day I was born.
Yeah.
And Nile records for me. I mean, that's why I always mention them, because for some reason it's the entry point can kind of work for anybody. Like if you have a soul and a fucking beating heart, and you put on the Blue Nile and you don't go, oh man, that's breathtaking. Then
Yeah.
I can't talk to you, because it's just that there's something so emotional about it.
Yeah. Love that. Well, look, we spoke about so many other people's records. Tell me all about what your band's up to.
Okay. Well, we're releasing our third record, I Wish You Way More Than Luck, on Friday. And the record started, I started thinking about the record in around December 2020. We were kind of finishing A Modern Life. Second record obviously was the middle of the pandemic, and I think the band and I were all, like everyone, feeling quite lost and confused about what to do next and how we would finish the record. And obviously it didn't seem like we were going to be able to tour the record, and that was pretty apparent. And I mentioned it a bit, but it reminded me of 9/11. Like there was a very specific time where everyone's paradigm shifted, and that happened during the pandemic. Everyone just kind of, their paradigm shifted. And for me, I was living at that school in Connecticut playing hockey, and there was this chapel on campus, and every week every student had to go into this chapel and share something, or one student every week. And around 9/11, because I was from New York and my family was in New York, and there was this kind of I had this very isolated feeling, and as did everyone. But for me, it's just like I turned to trying to write a song. It was like instantaneous for me. After seeing Bruce play My City of Ruins, and just I had written this poem called The City Cries Its Tears, and for some reason I wanted to put it to music and try to sing it. And I did, and I showed my teacher. And my teacher asked me if I would share it with the school, the entire student body, and I was absolutely petrified. And I was like, "There's absolutely no fucking way I'm doing that." But they kind of forced me to do it. And so I got up in this chapel, it's a very idyllic chapel, and I sang this song, and like it made something in me change. I was like, "Wow, that made me feel so much better about this situation." And I can tell that there was an emotion that people were feeling emotional, or they were reflective, or something happened. Hearing my voice in this chapel. And so in 2020, and I was like, I'm going to go back there and see. I hadn't been there in 20 years, and I was like, I'm going to see if I feel something. And I didn't tell the band exactly what I was going to do. I was just like, I'm going to go there. And I went when I was home in New York for Christmas. I just went to the chapel and I put my phone down, and I spent 2 days in there, and I just like recorded anything I could find. And then I kind of forgot about it. Couple months later, I sent a couple voice memos to the band, and a lot of the ideas for the record were from that very moment. And so we kind of chased this muse, this thing that I was after. And I went there initially in December to just feel better about the situation, not to write a record. I was just like, I want to go in there and reconnect with why I started playing music in the first place, and the very, very, very moment of discovery. So we did. And then I took the band back there, and we recorded some of the record in the chapel. And I wrote about this time in my life, this very, very kind of fragile time of discovery. And so the record is about that time in my life. Every song in some way talks about that. But yeah, that's it.
And gigs?
Lots of gigs, lots of gigs.
You coming over here?
We're gonna come over there in November. Yeah,
Fantastic.
we're gonna do the Scala in London, and
Wow.
which is will be our biggest show yet. So I'm very, very, very nervous and very, very excited.
Oh, that's fantastic. Matt, if people want to keep up to speed with releases and gig dates and such, where's the best place to stay up to speed?
I think, lowmoonofficial.com, and our Instagram, Low Moon, and Facebook is Low Moon, and Twitter is Low Moon.
Okay. If it's cool with you on the socials, I'll tag you in it. So if people aren't following you already, then they can do that nice and
That'd be
easily.
great. That'd be great.
Matt, it's been a real
Appreciate
pleasure talking records with you,
it.
mate.
You too, man. Really, really great. Really
Ah,
appreciate it.
I'm glad you had a nice time, man. I'm going to press stop, but don't go anywhere.
Cool, yeah.